This meeting will be conducted as a Zoom webinar to allow for public participation and comments. The Contra Costa Transportation Authority does not condone hate speech in any form. We continually strive to make life better for all members of our community and create an atmosphere where everyone feels a sense of safety and belonging. We ask that anyone who wishes to speak does so with civility, respect, and kindness for others. Citizens will have 3 minutes to speak. It is requested that public speakers state their names and organizations, but providing such information is voluntary. Citizens participating in person wishing to speak should submit a public speaker card to the clerk. Citizens participating by Zoom wishing to speak should use the raise hand feature or dial *9 if participating via phone, and the chair or staff will call upon them at the appropriate time. Written public comments received in accordance with the teleconferencing special notice on the meeting agenda will be provided to the members. If authors of the written correspondence would like to speak, they should raise their hand in Zoom or submit a public speaker card, and the chair will call upon them at the appropriate time. All written correspondence received after that and during the meeting will be entered into the record. Thank you for participating in a meeting of the Contra Costa Transportation Authority.
Great, thank you. And can we have the roll call, please?
Commissioner Arnridge,
Here.
Commissioner Fideli,
Here.
Commissioner Nowak,
Here.
Vice Chair Sauce, and Chair Hernandez-Thorpe. So we have Vice Chair Sauce and Chair Hernandez-Thorpe absent. We can move forward with the meeting.
We'll move forward with just information items since we don't have a quorum present physically. So we'll move on to item 2, public comment. If any members of the public are invited to address the committee regarding any item that's not listed on the agenda. Is there any members of the public?
I've received no public comment.
Thanks. Then we will move on to pages 5A, the legislative updates. Lindsay.
Good morning, Commissioners. I'm happy to introduce Mark Watts, who's here to provide a state legislative update.
Thank you. Is it going? Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I was just not used to such a 747 flight deck here right here. So it's pretty nice. Thank you for having me here today. We're at a funny juncture in the Capitol. The last week or last month was the deadline to introduce bills, and we just finished, me and a couple of my friends, going through all the bills that have been introduced. And I've been working and coordinating with Lindy, and we'll be bringing a slate of bills back for your information and some for action at the April meeting. But in the meantime, legislatively, I would also point out one of the issues with the February introduction of bills, a great number of them are so-called spot bills, or otherwise known as placeholder bills, and they, by rule, cannot be referred to a committee. So while the non-spot bills have to gestate for 30 days, as do the spot bills have to get amended, and that's going to have to be done sometime in the next couple of weeks so that they can get referred to committee. So we're anxiously awaiting to see what those new baby bills are going to turn into when they're fully gestated. So it's going to be an interesting couple of weeks. I would point out that talking to committee staff last week, we've kind of got a firm handle on when the transportation committees intend to start scheduling hearings. The Senate intends to have 2 hearings this year based on the number of bills that they know are coming their way. And the first of those would be on April 9th. And I think I have the wrong date here. I show April 22nd, but I think that's probably off by a day. The Assembly is going to schedule 4 hearings, and I'll send a follow-up to Lindy in case you need to have these more detailed information. The Assembly intends to have bills heard on April 1st, which is the first day back from their spring recess, April 8th, April 15th, and April 22nd. And they honestly told me the difficult bills would be loaded up for the 22nd. So bring your sleeping bags if you're coming to the Capitol to testify. And as I mentioned, we're coordinating on getting a package to you as soon as that makes some sense. We don't have the full range of bills. I will add a brief series of comments at the tail end of my conversation today on 4 or 5 bills of note that you will be hearing about. I didn't want to go away without leaving some taste of what's actually going on up there that's of interest, so I'll come back to that. The other major thing that's occurred in the last, within the last couple weeks is Senator McGuire in early February, I hope I didn't report on this before, I don't think I did, announced his new leadership team. And the most interesting appointment, not interesting, but long expected appointment was Senator Gonzalez from Long Beach moving from Senate Trans Chair to Majority Leader. So she's a very even-handed leader, as we saw as she led the Senate Transportation Committee. So I think that's going to augur well for the future, particularly as they get into the discussions about when Mr. McGuire is going to move on, given his term. So that's going to be a couple of years of good, steady leadership. I will point out that Senator Wahab is the Assistant Majority Leader. That's one Bay Area person. The other Bay Area notable appointment was Senator Cortese as Majority Whip. In addition were the committee changes, and Senator Wiener is now the chair of the powerful Budget and Fiscal Review Committee, replaced Senator Skinner, who's moved on, basically swapped positions with his position on the Housing Committee. Senator Cortese, again, comes to the forefront. He's now the chair of Transportation. And he is, in fact, in addition to that, just yesterday, Mr. McGuire, the Pro Tem McGuire, I've got to get used to using the proper titles. It's all newly minted folks, made Senator Cortese the Senate ex officio member of the State Transportation Commission. So that's a good position for him, good position for the Bay Area. But I would remind you, it's not a voting position, but it's very influential, so that's a good slot for the Bay Area. In addition, Senator Wahab is now chair of the Budget Subcommittee number 5, which has jurisdiction over public safety and transportation matters. And she replaces, the former chair, DeRozo. And last, I would point out that the Senate Governance and Finance Committee was divided into 2, and Senator Caballero was the chair of that. Local government portion of that new committee, or broken off committee, is now going to be chaired by Senator DeRozo, and local Senator Glazer will be chairing the very important Revenue and Taxation Committee, which I think is going to be front and center for a lot of activity this year, given the Bay Area interest, and as well as the state budget and solutions to the state budget. So we look forward to having a local senator as the leader of that committee. We've talked a little bit in the past about the state budget condition. I will just add that the most recent development was in the Department of Finance February monthly finance bulletin. They reported on general fund cash receipts were $5 billion below. So the numbers that we'd had, where we had the difference between the governor and the legislative analyst office, but in the $60 to $70 billion range. Forget about the solutions. We can't take care of those yet. We've just gone with another $5 billion multi-year issue, and that just makes the whole budget process going to be more difficult. The next steps, actually, when I wrote this, there was next steps, but they've already started on this. The budget subcommittees have started to meet. Yesterday, the subcommittee that deals with the environment and climate had a presentation that actually included a couple commentaries about the transportation budget, but nothing was new there. But I just wanted to report that they've started the process and will be reaching out for assistance and an analysis at some point on some of the new budget proposals as they come forward from the governor's office.
Mark,
Yes.
the $5 billion below, can you clarify that
Yeah.
figure, what that means? I mean, is that a deficit number?
It's just a change in the amount of cash. It's not a deficit number. You're already in a deficit condition, but it's just below forecast. So with that run through on what's going on in the Capitol, I thought I'd give you the couple bills of note. And in addition, Lindy reminded me to give you an update on AB 817, so I'll do that at the very end. The four bills that I identified, I'm not going to make any prognostication on how well they're going to do, whether they're good, bad, or indifferent. I just want to put them out there because I do feel you will start to hear about them in one way or the other. Assemblymember Bonta has introduced AB 2535, and it deals with the SB1 corridor investment program. But basically, the bill would eliminate any general purpose lanes as eligible for any of the TCEP money. So in other words, if you put a TCEP program together for a corridor, you will not be able to allocate the funding from any award you receive from this SB1 program onto a general purpose lane or new capacity as well. So that's an interesting new development. I'm not sure how that's going to in meetings with the Assembly and committee staff, they are working on trying to clarify and help the author figure better ways to say some of the elements of the bill. So we'll just go with that for now. The next bill I'll present is AB 2086, and this is by Assemblymember Chavo. Caltrans has adopted what they call their four core principles, and it's in concert with the Secretary's office, and they are safety, equity, climate action, and economic prosperity. And those are supposed to guide Caltrans's determination when they make funding recommendations or funding requests, that these four core items will guide their decision making. The bill will ask Caltrans to look at what funding was been made, look back for the last 5 years to meet those four core challenges, and then also make a report going forward and post it on a new dashboard so that the transportation world and the public can monitor how well or how close they're hewing to their own principles.
What was the fourth one? Safety, equity?
I'm sorry, I went to say
No, I
safety.
just couldn't, I didn't start writing.
Safety, equity, climate action, and economic prosperity.
Oh, okay.
The other thing the bill does, which is catching some attention, is it would create a role or establish the fact that the CTC would be required to develop performance targets for those four goals. So now you see it's crossing functions between different agencies, and there's a lot of discussion going on about that element. AB 2290 by Assemblymember Freeman does several things, but one of them is that if you have a bicycle facility for a street in an adopted plan or an adoptive bike plan or adopted ATP, active transportation plan, let me explain it this way. If you're a local city and you're going to be doing a 2-inch overlay for a good stretch, and you look forward in the bike plan or the ATP plan, and yes, out there 5 years from now, you've got a plan to upgrade Sharrows into actually a separated bike lane or whatever, this bill would require you to pull that forward. It's all good and well. The problem is, where's the money come from to be able to do that? You may end up losing the original paving plan. So that's going to be, I think, a lot of grist for discussion, particularly at the league and CSAC levels. And last, last of the ones I first brought here, Senator Wiener's SB 960 basically directs that any transportation program overseen by Caltrans will have to have what they call comfortable, convenient, and connected complete streets facilities. and they require the CTC to adopt targets and performance measures to direct this program. It is really affecting the ability, I think, well, it's directed at Caltrans. Caltrans has a small STIP program, a very robust large SHOP program, so the target is really the SHOP program to be a funder of complete streets as well as the main rehabilitation program that they're responsible for. Thanks to Lindy, she updated me on SB 925, Senator Wiener's bill. I'll be getting another briefing from MTC staff on where they are in their negotiations, but they're keeping it close to the vest right now. The news is they're anticipating at least Senate Transportation to be one of the committees of jurisdiction to hear this bill. But they're now expecting it to be double referred either to Rev and Tax or the Senate Local Government Committee. And as I mentioned before, Senator Senator Glazier now is the chair of Rev and Tax, so this could work out nicely as you go forward. We'll see how that is. But that's what's going on there. AB 817, this is the measure that deals with the teleconferencing requirements for subsidiary bodies. And the major provision, if you look at it, really calls on that advisory body must be exclusively advisory with no administration function beyond that. The bill has not yet been set. It's been in the Senate for a while, and that's not unusual. Second House bills, as they came over, are being shepherded, and they'll be taken up after each house takes care of the bills they just now introduced in their houses. So it'll likely get referred sometime in the next month or so, but probably held by the committees it goes to for hearing in the late spring or early summer. So with that completes my presentation.
Questions? Questions, Newell?
Yes, thank you, Mark. Thanks for that update. Interesting when you mentioned what Senator Wiener was talking about, and your example of a 2-inch overlay that you'd have to advance. If you had a complete streets program, you'd have to advance that. Is that on the presumption that you have state funding involved? Because if you don't have state funding, the state doesn't have any authority what we would do.
Right. Let me separate them. The Wiener bill deals with Caltrans projects only.
Or maybe I got the wrong bill then, sorry.
Yeah. And so the other bill, Friedman's bill, is directed to any entity. So if it's, but I think it's going to play out more for local streets and roads, because the 2-inch overlay example I gave you, and as I said, if you look at your plans on the shelves for ATP and bikes, if there's one out there, you now got to take care of it, and there's no discussion of funding for it.
So how do they find the legislative authority? I mean, that's like running local government. I mean, the state's been doing that, particularly since one senator's gotten in place. But it seems fundamental, instead of on a bill like that, trying to modify it, there's a principal level there. I don't believe that they have legislative authority to dive in and poke at that when they have no funding source or anything involvement. That through the Constitution, we have a general charter that says we're supposed to run that. So where's that nexus, you think?
Right, and I think you're correct. And I think that's going to be the major issue is it a mandate or not? And that's not for me to say, but and I think that'll then determine the fate of the bill.
Yeah, okay. Mark, thanks, thank you.
Sorry, it's a bad budget year, so it's.
Yeah, and it's still, you'd mentioned, as Paul had asked, about the $5 million shortfall in cash. But aside from that, the state from the LAO still said we were about $86 billion short versus what governor said at mid-30s. Is that still true?
They haven't reconciled that yet. I think they're working on that, and I think we're going to start to see that in some of the early action plans that will be released by the governor and the Department of Finance in the coming weeks. And I think the early action plans will be not just one-sided proposals by the administration. They will have been packages worked on between the two houses of the legislature and the governor, so they can get those out of the way and see if they can start getting the deficit number down over this year and the next 2 years. I think I'll just headline this. I think that those early action items may well start to look at some of the major TIRCP money that was put on the table the last 2 years, $4 billion, as well as $1 billion for ZEV from the general fund for trucks. So I think that $5 billion is going to be in play to some degree.
Great, Mark, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mark.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Next, we're going to introduce Gus Maples to give us a federal legislative update. Thank you, Gus.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Some big news in DC this week. I'm happy to report a more substantive update on the government funding front. Yesterday afternoon, the House, with a broad bipartisan majority, passed the first half of the federal fiscal year 2024 appropriations. This is a 6-bill package coming in around $460 billion, includes funding for agencies at the Department of Transportation and Housing and Urban Development. The allocation was tighter this year than in the past couple of years. This was largely due to negotiations between former Speaker McCarthy and President Biden in an attempt to rein in spending addressing concerns the new Republican House had. The House Republican bill had actually cut a lot of programs to about 25% beneath current year funding levels. The final agreement is much closer to maintaining current funding levels. So that's good for a lot of programs that CCTA receives and competes for. The big kicker in a lot of this was housing assistance and also some aviation safety programs that just had unprecedented needs this year. Part of that was also due to the impact on current interest rate policies. But a couple of examples of the programmatic levels, RAISE grants, which local communities can directly compete for funding from the Department of Transportation, will be funded at an additional $345 million. That's above the $1.5 billion provided in the infrastructure law. But for comparison on the impacts of some of these cuts, last year, the additional amount was closer to $800 billion. So there is some restriction on spending here. Transit Capital Investment Grant Program did see a roughly $100 million increase to a total of $2.2 billion. The Federal Aid Highway Program apportionment for California is just over $5 billion across all programs. That's your CMAQ, your Surface Transportation Block Grants, the Protect Resiliency Program. Another significant piece of legislation under consideration, and that bill has now moved on to the Senate, which we expect could vote before the funding lapses for these programs tomorrow at midnight. Another significant piece of legislation that's on the docket right now is the FAA reauthorization. Both the House and Senate the Senate has finally moved its version of this bill. Both include a little over $100 billion for a 5-year policy program. This is for airport infrastructure, security, and some regulation changes. This will be extended under the current levels until May 10th. And congressional leaders expect that given that extra 2-month window, now they will be able to negotiate between the newly crafted Senate bill and the House bill to have a new 5-year FAA program as well. Shifting gears a bit, we've been working with Lindy, preparing for the DC trip next week when Executive Director Hale and Chairman Arnerich and Vice Chair Thorpe will be here to meet with agency officials and talk about local projects on the horizon. Now that Congress is in the process this week of closing out activity on fiscal year 24, grant programs will begin to be reopened for the upcoming year with this new infusion of cash over the spring and summer for new applications. More opportunities following the recent RAISE grant application that was just submitted, and the fiscal year 25 appropriations process will also be kicking off. We have the State of the Union with President Biden, and then his budget request is expected to come out next week, likely on Tuesday, which will be the sort of starting gun for the next upcoming fiscal year's budget process. And we'll be working with the team to get those requests in the upcoming weeks, but we'll also be meeting with some of the delegation to press for those as well. That concludes what I have prepared today, but happy to take any questions.
Any questions? No?
Just maybe a comment really
Yep.
quick.
Tim?
Just a quick overview of next week's kind of agenda. So Mr. Maples kind of highlighted one of the items, and so we just submitted a RAISE grant for the 684 interchange for phase 4 for $25 million. So we're going to be following up on that. And then we're preparing, as Mr. Maples mentioned, is we're starting to prepare for the discretionary grant programs this year. And the ones that we're targeting is MEGA. And so MEGA is on the federal regional strategy. And so, Innovate 680 is on that list. And so we're going to be kind of starting to walk around what our new proposal is going to be for MEGA for the basically northbound express lanes, the share mobility hubs, potentially 684. And so we're putting together that package right now to walk around in DC next week. And then the other thing we're going to be focused on is the Dynamic Personal Microtransit project in Eastern Contra Costa County, kind of start getting that ready for some grant funding out of the Attain and SMART programs. And then obviously we're going to be really focused on potential opportunities with Gomentum 2.0. And so I think we're going to be meeting with obviously USDOT, FDA, at Federal Highways, but also talk to Build America Bureau, because Build America Bureau has some interesting P3 grant programs that might be interesting to the Gomentum. And then I think we're also, not confirmed, but we're going to try to get into some of the offices of labor to talk about our workforce development programs with Gomentum 2.0. So that's kind of the agenda for next week.
Great, thanks.
Very light load then, huh, is what you're saying?
You know how we roll, Paul. Always a light
That was
load.
MEGA, not MAGA, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, on that note, thanks, Gus, appreciate it. I don't know how we can get past that one. Anything else, Lindy?
No, thank you,
She
Mr.
can't-
Maples, for being here. Thank you, commissioners.
Yeah, she can't get past that either. Okay, we can't do B. And C, are we doing C? C, and C2 we got to pull. So, correspondence and communications. Nothing? Commissioners?
Yeah, I just again want to thank, yesterday El Cerrito had a great Complete Streets event. Thank you, Lindy, and our Vice Chair, Mayor Antioch was there, and it was a great event, and we were able to talk about the contributions that WICTAC made and that CCTA made in a variety of ways, and I was able to talk about how creative CCTA was in pulling together grant programs to finance that. So it was a great event, and I'm going to be posting some stuff later. Thank you.
And I'm going to be in Sacramento Sunday through Tuesday on SB 925 and discussing REAP 2.0 and some housing issues as part of MTC. So we all have a busy week next week. Not a big surprise.
Can I ask a question? Is the SB 925 the first hearing about to happen?
So they're still working on the wording.
The language? Okay.
Wiener, I think, is having a press conference on Monday in the city, but we're just scheduled
Okay.
discussing the language, a lot of the language
Okay.
still in Sacramento on
Let us
Monday
know
and
if we can help in
Tuesday.
any way. Okay.
Yeah. I think that's it. Tim?
There's a legislative reception on Monday as well that Chair Armich, Vice Chair Hernandez Thorpe, as well as Commissioner Nowak will be attending as well. And it should be a good turnout, and be a good turnout on Sacramento on Monday as well. So it'll be a busy week next week.
Okay, with that, sorry to drag all of you here for a little shortened meeting, but we will be adjourned. Thanks.
Thanks, everybody.
Recording stopped.